Please join me in welcoming home to the Hall of Fame our very special guest, Miss Denise Curry. It was kind of a moving screen over there, I saw. Yeah, it's all good. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, what a joy to have you with us today. Thanks so much for coming. And all these nice folks joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate that. I know you didn't come just for me, but nonetheless, thank you.
Well, let's begin with one of the hotbeds of basketball history, Fort Benton, Montana. What was life like in Fort Benton, Montana as a little girl?
Well, to be honest, I was born in Fort Benton, which is a small town near Great Falls, which isn't even that big of a town, but for Montana, it's considered big. Then we moved to 2 other small towns in Montana, but I really grew up in Northern California. I consider Davis, California, my hometown, even though I am a proud Montanan.
And did you begin playing ball in Montana or when you got to California?
Actually, I began, my father was a longtime high school basketball coach. And I think when you grow up in that environment, you either learn to love the game or hate it, because everything revolved around that during basketball season. You know, I went to his practices instead of having a babysitter. We certainly went to all the games, so I was influenced from an early age. But I started playing probably when I was about 5 years old, right before we moved to California. Played a little bit, but never played organized ball until I was in the 9th grade, because there weren't opportunities for girls before that.
I was going to ask you about that first. Did you do other sports as well?
Played lots of sports. Played field hockey, volleyball, softball, as well as basketball in high school. Actually played softball for 1 year at UCLA in college. And love all sports, but basketball is definitely my biggest love.
Well, and let's talk about that. You mentioned again that there were not so many opportunities. I'm so amazed that many women of your generation and beyond, they began playing, where could they play basketball? You know, were there opportunities for girls to play ball, or did you have to wait to high school? Was there a team that you could play on?
There actually, on my junior high, because we're 7th, 8th, 9th grade junior high, there were not girls' teams. There were boys' teams, not girls. But the high school principal got approval from the conference that the high school was in to let 9th grade girls play on the high school JV team. We were allowed to try out. So as a 9th grader, I played on the high school JV team. And that was my first official team that I was ever a member of as a basketball player. Wow. So I'd played a lot. As I mentioned, my father was a coach, so I was influenced from an early age, and I shot around a lot. I have a brother who's 2 years older, and he was magnificent. Not only did he really allow me to play with him and all his buddies, but he really reached out and accepted me and encouraged me to play, and I owe Mike a great deal for that. It's
an amazing thing. Many of you young folks here today don't realize that not that long ago there just weren't the opportunities for young women to play in so many sports, including basketball. It's come so far in our lifetime how this game has emerged and become much more accessible to everybody. It's a great thing that all you folks can play this beautiful game at any level, and there are teams and everyone's ready to play.
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful, and I'm so appreciative for the opportunities that I had. But there's just so many more for young girls and boys today than there ever has been. And that's the way it should be. Everybody should be exposed to different things and have opportunities to try different things. And for me, like I said, I'm very appreciative that I grew up in the household I did, where sports were really a great part of what we did, and I was encouraged to play. But again, the opportunities to play on a team and all those came later for me. But at least they came, so I'm very thankful for that.
And were you instinctively good at the game? Did it take a while to develop? This is something playing with your brother and playing under your dad's tutelage?
Well, I thought I was pretty good until I'd start playing one-on-one against my brother, and he'd call out my move or my shot before I did it. And then, of course, I tried to change it and end up airballing or whatever. But obviously, it was something that I took to and really enjoyed playing and loved to shoot all the time, loved to practice, loved to hang out and just play and be around basketball. And so I think all of that for me made me have a really good foundation. And then when a team opportunity came, I was ready for that. And obviously, I've had a pretty successful career. I don't think I'd change too many things about it.
Sure. So at that high school team, who was the coach? Who was your high school coach?
I had two different high school coaches. Barb Eiten, who had been at the University of California, Berkeley. She was my high school coach as a sophomore. As a JV, it was a woman who actually coached several other sports, so basketball wasn't her primary sport. But Barb Eiten didn't have a full-time teaching position, so after that first year, and we won a CIF section title, which is the highest level that you can attain in California at the time. Now they have state championships. She had to leave to find a full-time teaching job. So then George Fleming became my coach as a junior and senior, and I stay in great contact with him. He's a dear friend.
So had a major influence on your life and your growth.
Huge influence. I was very, very fortunate to have outstanding coaches in high school. And again, at the time, and you know, I think you guys, I don't think it was that long ago. You guys probably think it was the dark ages, but a lot of high schools, when they hired a teacher, they said, oh, and you have to coach girls this, or girls that, or this, and they may or may not have been qualified, or it may or may not have been anything they really wanted to do. At Davis High School, where I grew up, which is right outside of Sacramento in Northern California, they had really good quality coaches for the girls. And again, that made a huge impact, and a huge difference. So the high school coaches I had were outstanding.
And the recruiting process is now such a very public and aggressive process. How did UCLA find you, and when did you first become aware that they were maybe interested in having you play there?
I grew up, as I mentioned, in Davis, and Davis, California was considered the bicycle capital of the world at the time. There's more bicycles per capita than any place in the world. Now, I believe there's several cities and communities in China and in Europe now that have surpassed those numbers. But Davis had these police auctions for abandoned bicycles and parts and things, and they'd have these police auctions every like 3 or 4 months. And I used to go to these police auctions. I am going to get to your question, by the way. I'm just telling you that. I'd go to these auctions, and I would buy these parts or these abandoned bikes and put them together and sell them, and then with that money, I went to basketball camp. So that was my first exposure to playing against and with a lot of really good, outstanding players. I had good high school teammates. And certainly played against some good people as well. But when you go to these summer camps, you see how many good players are actually out there. And there were a lot of different college coaches who either could have been just there to observe. In most cases, they were working those camps. At the time, a lot of the head college coaches worked at a lot of different camps. And that's when I think people kind of found me as a basketball player.
Well, so you were very motivated. If you were raising that money, the game obviously meant a lot to you already.
It meant a tremendous amount to me, absolutely.
Well, and did UCLA specifically then come and say, come play with us? I mean, UCLA is already, certainly from the men's perspective, one of the legendary programs for some time at that point. It was a real honor for them to even notice you, I would imagine.
Absolutely. The coach at the time, Ellen Mosier, saw me after I believe my sophomore year in high school was the first time, and then she started recruiting me. And so I signed with UCLA during my senior year, and at the time, women really weren't heavily recruited on a national level. At the time, I probably was considered a big-time recruit, and I probably had 25, 30 schools that were interested now. You know, it'd be a few hundred.
Sure.
But Pat Summitt was one of those coaches who worked camps in the West Coast, and she recruited me to go to Tennessee, but I decided I really wanted to stay in California. And you grow up in California, you heard about UCLA, certainly primarily because of men's basketball, and when they showed that interest, I knew that's where I wanted to go.
So from the very small town in Montana to Davis, which is a middle-sized place, to this hotbed of basketball activity and a great campus at Westwood, what was that transition like for you? Was it a wonderful time of your life? Was it scary? Was it intimidating? How did it feel?
Those are all good ways of describing it. Yeah, it was scary, it was wonderful, it was intimidating, it was all of those things. It was certainly a great opportunity for me. The summer before my freshman year at UCLA, I made the U.S. junior national team, and that was the first junior national team that U.S. had ever had for women.
The first.
The very first. Yeah. And that summer was really good for me from a basketball standpoint and probably just a growing up standpoint, being away from home, training, working hard, the competition within practice and the games. And so by the time I started in the fall at UCLA, the basketball transition had already kind of started for me. I was more equipped to come in as a freshman than I normally would have been, I believe.
And the men's program obviously was, legendary at that, beyond legendary at that point. Was the women's program celebrated on campus? Did you feel like, yoicks, we're just small time compared to these big guys, or was it? How did that feel?
It certainly, we weren't celebrating in the sense how the men's basketball players were, certainly not. Coach Wooden had retired a couple years earlier, but the men were a big deal and still are a big deal, as are the women now. But yeah, we were celebrated to some extent, but certainly not like the men were. One
of the other remarkable women in the Hall of Fame, Annie Myers, teammate of yours back in the day, talks of, obviously UCLA, and talked about Coach Wooden as such an important part of her life, personally as well as professionally. Did you know Coach, and did he have any influence on you as well?
Coach Wooden, actually, I had attended 2 of his camps. That was some of that bicycle money that I had saved so I go to camp. So I went to 2 of his camps. So I did have the pleasure of knowing him actually prior to coming to UCLA. And then he came around campus and he'd come to our games. I didn't know him the same way that Annie knew him. Annie was a lot closer to him. Her older brother David had played for Coach Wooden. Right. So she had a longer relationship than I did, but I certainly knew Coach.
Well, again, for the young people here, when you get a chance to Google or go home or get on YouTube or whatever, look up the UCLA basketball programs in the 60s and the 70s under Coach John Wooden. It's a name that I know many of you young folks might not know. He's one of the few people who's in the Hall of Fame twice as a player and a coach, but his teams on the college level won champion after champion after champion. It was just one of the remarkable stories in the history of our game. So look it up. It's good stuff to know about. And a great man and a great teacher who had such a positive influence on so many people. And your coach in college was? Billy
Moore, who actually, when I signed with UCLA as a senior, it was Ellen Mosier, and then they'd made a coaching change. And Billy had been the head coach at Cal State Fullerton, another school that I'd considered, but obviously made the decision to go to UCLA. But she became the coach at UCLA. They made that decision, I think, in the spring prior to my enrollment in the fall. So just an exceptional person, exceptional coach. She's actually in the Hall of Fame here, and I was privileged to be one of her presenters with Annie the year that she was inducted, but just a phenomenal coach for me personally, and just a great coach for women's basketball. She also was our first Olympic coach. She was an Olympic coach in 1976, the first year they had Olympics for women. And again, they won a silver medal.
Just from the history perspective, that was the first time there was a women's Olympic team in 1976. It's all recent history. One of the great things about our game is that it's real people who had these experiences, and it's not that long ago. It's kind of the contemporary world we all grew up with.
Well, I kind of think I'm contemporary, but like I said, a lot of people think, man, that was old. That was olden times and all this, and I don't really think of it being that long ago. So there's been a lot of changes and positive changes at that in the last few decades.
Well, you weren't just a good player. You were a great collegiate player. I mean, on both sides of the floor, and I wondered about that. You were obviously a great scorer, averaging over 24 points a game, and scoring in double figures every game of your collegiate career, which is unbelievable. You never took a night off, I gather.
Well, I might have been told I might have taken a night off at the defensive end a few times, but no, offense was something that came actually fairly easily to me, and I could shoot the ball pretty well. I think it was all those hours in the gym, my dad's basketball practices, just shooting on the side baskets while his games are going on, and all the shots I took in the driveway, and all the times I spent with my brother and his friends, and just, the accumulation of all of that ended up, I had a pretty good touch. So I would say scoring was definitely my strength on the court.
Yeah, but some people can rebound and some people can't. It's a thing that everyone has to work at, and for some of the great Hall of Famers who were natural at it. Was it a natural part of your game too? Would you really have to, because you had double-doubles every night, averaging every year?
To be honest, I think once you figure it out, if you get on the offensive boards, you can have as many shots as you want.
Yeah.
Then that was something that I went after. But rebounding, I think, was a good strength of mine. I played both on the perimeter as well as inside. I was about 6'1", so kind of a tweener position. Of course, nowadays everybody spreads the floor and everybody does a little bit of everything. But for that, at that time, I was considered a pretty versatile player because I could play on the perimeter. If I had a big player on me, I could put the ball on the floor and go by her. If I played inside, I was quick enough to score against maybe some players that had a little more size or girth than I had. So, but offense was something that I certainly, you know, came relatively easily to me. But again, I put in so much time.
Sure.
And I played because I loved it, but I didn't look at it as, oh, I have to put in time for my game. I looked at it as, I love this game. I love to play.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about.
And in 1978, of course, that team comes together and wins the national championship. Again, a generation ago, it's had different impact perhaps on the world. How did you and the women's team feel about winning that championship?
You know, you mentioned that I played with Hall of Famer Annie Meyer. She was a senior my freshman year, so I walked into a great situation with having a tremendous player and a tremendous leader like Annie. Billy Moore's our basketball coach.
And great people.
And great people, and
Yes.
great teammates, and people are my dearest friends to this day. So I walked into a really good situation, and, you know, obviously we had a really outstanding team when we win it, you know, my freshman year. And I was told this morning that I need to add this tidbit. I also played softball at UCLA one year, and we won the national title in softball as well my freshman year. So I tell everybody, everything was downhill from my freshman year. We win it in basketball, we win it in softball, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with UCLA's softball program. I think they won 11 national titles, and I was a member of their first title team. I didn't play much, but I was part of that program. So, yeah, it was a phenomenal freshman year. I mean, obviously can't ask for much more than 2 national titles. Unfortunately, didn't win any more. Got back to the Final Four basketball my sophomore year, Final 8 as a senior. But yeah, I had a really, really good freshman season. Again, walked into a great situation.
And you began to play internationally as well, representing the United States, and you won a national world championship. And then you had, I always think, kind of the best. Lynette Woodard was here a couple of weeks ago and we was talking, the best and the worst things that can happen for the Olympics. In 1980, of course, you make the Olympic team, and then we didn't go.
Yeah, major disappointments. You can imagine, you make the Olympic team, you know, the highest level of sport at that time, and you know, because of a decision that our president made, we didn't attend. So very, very disappointing. I understood his rationale for doing it, but on the other hand, it was still really disappointing as an athlete to miss out. I was fortunate enough to hang in there, and I played 4 years later in 1984, which were the Los Angeles Games. But a lot of people, my teammates from the 80 team, and then, you know, players and athletes in other sports weren't able to make another Olympic team and compete. So it was certainly a disappointment, but again, I was fortunate that I had kind of another opportunity.
Well, you won, you won the national championship in college. You won several championships overseas in Europe. What was it like winning a gold medal, though, in 1984?
You know, it's pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty good stuff. You know, you're part of a team, and there's nothing like being part of a team. It's the best. You know, I've done some individual sports stuff, not certainly the level I did in men's basketball, but there's nothing like being a part of a team and working together to achieve something like that. It was in Los Angeles. I'd gone to school at UCLA. I consider myself a Californian, had lots of friends and family there, and we played phenomenally well. So it was a really fantastic experience.
Tremendous team, too, when you look back at folks. I'm curious as to your relationship with Teresa Edwards and Kim Mulkey and a couple of easygoing, relaxed people on that team.
Yeah, Teresa Edwards, I think, was our youngest player. Cheryl Miller was part of that team, another young player. Lynette Woodard and I are the same age, the same year in school. Kim Mulkey, you know, we all know her at Baylor from her sideline antics, but she's a great person and great competitor, a great ball player, great teammate. So, Pat Summitt was the head coach.
I was going to ask, tell me about Coach Summitt. What did she mean to you?
Yeah, she's just somebody who just demanded the best at all times, just really intense. I've never been around a person who's more intense than she is, but off the court, just a great person, great sense of humor. But she gets it out of you, man. She gets it out of you on both ends, you know, because if you don't play both ends, you're not going to play for her.
So many of the women on that team, I'm talking about quality people, you didn't get the accolades. It was not so easy. That tremendous character demonstrated by the people on that team. When you look person by person, what remarkable people they were.
But you know what? We got to play basketball. We got to represent our country, our families, our friends. You know, it's It's the Olympics. It's fantastic. Anytime you put on that uniform, it's fantastic. And yeah, would we like maybe some more accolades? Would I like a bigger bank account? Sure, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
But, you know, I played because I love to play and I love to compete.
Sure. And of course, in those days, this is pre-WNBA days, you did coach, I know, 1 year in a women's professional league in this country, but your playing career went overseas, and you played in some great places in France and Italy and Germany. What was that like? Was that, again, intimidating and scary to go to different cultures, or was it a wonderful time in your life?
You know, by the time I went to Germany for 3 seasons, France for 4, and Italy for 1 in that order. So I played 8 years overseas. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Phenomenal experience. Was it perfect? No. But especially as I look back on it, I mean, it was a great, great experience. I miss Europe to this day. I'd love to live there half the year and here half the year. Who wouldn't? But because I'd played internationally for the U.S., and I'd competed at UCLA. By the time I went over, I was really confident in my basketball ability and my ability to produce and what I need to do as a professional player. Everyday adjustment, new language, new culture, not knowing people, having lots of free time. You go from being in college where you're really, really busy. Every hour in your day is really accounted for. You go over there, you practice in the evenings. We played 1 or 2 games on the weekend, had a lot of free time. So. You learn a lot more about yourself, that's for sure. And if you don't like to read, now, I mean, you can pull up anything you want. You can watch any movie, you can watch anything in the world online, wherever you are. But at the time, fortunately, I liked to read and I liked to learn. I was a history major in college. And so I really enjoyed being in Europe, and I enjoyed having that time.
Well, you mentioned you were 3 years in Germany, which is 3 championships in the German league.
3 championships in
Germany. And then
Germany.
you're in France and 2 more championships.
2 more championships, yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you were the player of the decade in France.
I was voted, I played there for 4 years from 1985 to 1989, and I was, when they came out sometime in the early 90s, I was anointed the French player of the decade for the 1980s.
That's pretty good. Yeah. You mentioned you were a history major. I'm just curious for the young people, if you could talk a little bit about your approach to academics and how you balanced that with your love of the game and sports and everything. Was it a challenge for you all the time, or just something you loved both parts, so your life was full that way?
You know, I mentioned my father's a longtime high school coach. My mother is a teacher as well. My father was a history teacher. So again, I grew up in that household, basketball and history and all that, and those are kind of the paths that I followed. As far as balance and everything, when you're in college, all your hours are accounted for. You're in class, you're in study hall, you're in practice, you're in weights, you're doing whatever. But it's good, it's fun, it's something that we enjoy doing. And I think if you're good at managing your time, then you can achieve both at a very high level. But it has to be important to you, and you have to be willing to put in the time.
Sure.
And you have to take it seriously, because I knew basketball is wonderful. I never thought in a million years I'd have an opportunity to play professionally. I never thought in a million years I'd be sitting here and having been enshrined in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that was never on the radar. I knew I was going to have to work and support myself. So school was really important. It is important. It was very much emphasized in my family.
Yeah. My dad was a teacher too, history teacher.
That's awesome.
Good people.
Yeah, really good people.
And as Steve had mentioned earlier, if anyone has a question for Ms. Curry, it'd just be a good time to raise your hand. We'll collect you and pull you into the conversation in just a minute or two. You transitioned, though, into coaching. A lot of great players can't do that. It's really hard to coach other people who might not have the skills or the drive. How was that transition for you?
You know, I came back from playing overseas, and I was fortunate enough to walk into a great situation at the University of California, Berkeley, as an assistant coach. In fact, one of our fellow assistant coaches, Richard Abel, he's over there. He's one of my dearest friends, and he came to see me this afternoon. He lives in upstate New York. But, you know, I love basketball. I mentioned my father's a longtime coach. My older brother is a coach. He's won 11 state championships in Wyoming.
Wow.
My younger brother coached for a long time. I think my sister was the only smart one and stayed away from the coaching bug. But again, it's kind of our family business. And I really enjoyed coaching. I enjoyed the relationship with the players. I was a head coach for a couple of years, not so successful as far as win and losses. I actually think I'm better suited as an assistant. And no, I just love it. Again, you're around the game. Hopefully you're making a positive impact on people. And you're hopefully growing the game a little bit,
sure,
or leaving a little bit better than when I was in it.
Absolutely. So, do we have a question for Ms. Curry? Come on over. And what is your name and what is your question?
Stephen. How was it in the Olympics?
Did you say your name's Stephen?
Yes.
Hi, Stephen. Nice to see you. Thank you for your question. Love the Olympics. It was a great experience, you know, marching in opening ceremonies with all the other athletes, and it was in the Los Angeles Coliseum. There's 100,000 people in the stands, and everybody's just really excited to see the American team especially, as well as the other teams march in. It was a great experience. And as I mentioned, we won a gold medal, so that was pretty great too. Yeah. So yeah, it was just a really good memory and a good time for me.
Thanks for your question, Stephen. Come on over. What's your name and what is your question for Ms. Curry?
My name is Hallie. What is your favorite NBA team?
Hi, Hallie. My favorite NBA team, boy, I don't know. I'm in this part of the country. I got to be careful here. You know, as I mentioned, I grew up in Northern California, and after I played in Europe, I came back and coached at University of California, Berkeley, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And there's a team that's pretty good there called the Golden State Warriors.
Pretty good.
You might have heard of them. I like them. Now, I wasn't always a Warriors fan. I grew up a San Francisco 49ers and a San Francisco Giants fan. Those have always been my football and basketball teams. But I like them. I got to be honest, though, I like the Celtics as well. My dad was a Celtics fan. So,
good man.
But, yeah, and I live in Los Angeles now. I'm not too excited about the Lakers or Clippers just because I didn't grow up with them. But, yeah, I got a couple favorite basketball teams.
Thanks, Hallie. Come on over. What is your name and what's your question for Ms. Curry?
My name is Mulkey, and my question is, how many women were on your Olympics team?
Okay. What did you say your name was?
Mulkey.
Mulkey. Nice to see you. Thank you for your question. How many teammates did I have? There were 12 members of our team. As far as players, and then we had 3 coaches, a head coach, 2 assistant coaches, and then we had an athletic trainer, we had a team manager, we had a team doctor, and then other people who traveled and kind of organized and helped us with all of those things. But there was actually 12 players.
But you'd been picked from a lot of other players around the country to make that team.
Yeah, there were probably several hundred that come to tryouts.
That's right. Come on, thanks, Mulkey. Come on over. What is your name and what's your question for Ms. Curry? Hi.
My name's Ashley, and how is it like to be a basketball player?
Hi, Ashley. How is it like to be a basketball player? It's fun. Do you play basketball? It's just fun. I just love to play. I love to play all sports. I just love the game. I have so much fun. Whenever I hear the ball bouncing, man, my eyes light up. I just love it. I'm a big-time basketball fan. I don't coach or play anymore, but I go to as many games as I can at all different levels, and I watch as many games on television as I can.
Thanks, Ashley. Nice. Thanks for coming over. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. What is your name and what's your question for Ms. Curry?
My name's Elijah, and my question is, are you related to Stephen Curry?
Okay, Elijah, do you mean, is he related to me?
That's right.
Is that what you meant to say?
She's the Hall of Famer. Yeah.
You know, I get asked that a lot. No, not that I'm aware of. But I remember when his father, Dell, played. We're about the same age, but no, I am not related to him. Darn it.
Yeah. He's pretty good, though, isn't he?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's a good question.
Come on over. What's your name and what's your question for Ms. Curry?
My name is Connor, and what was the most challenging part of your career?
Hi, Connor. That's a really good question. The most challenging part of my career. You know what? When I mentioned I played overseas in Europe for 8 years as a professional, and I loved it. It was a great experience. But leaving friends and family every year to go back over for 7, 8, 9 months, that part was hard. That part was hard. But, you know, it was my job at the time, and it was basketball, so I wouldn't trade that, but that was difficult for me. Good question. Thank you.
Thanks, Connor. And come on over. What's your name and your question for Ms. Curry?
I'm going to ask you, what inspired you to do basketball, or what else inspired you to do it?
Okay. Did you say her name's Naya?
Yeah.
Your name is?
Janaea.
Janaea. Hi, Janaea.
Yes.
What inspired me? You know, I just grew up in a household where everything was around basketball. I was just around it, so I was exposed to it really early. I've always been going to games and hearing about basketball, and I just learned to love the game. So I think I just was inspired by just being in a family that loved the sport of basketball and other sports. And what else inspires me? Good people, good books, good conversation. I just enjoy life, I guess. How about that?
That's a pretty good answer. Thanks, Janaea. Thank you. And we have time for one more. And what is your name, and what's your question for Ms. Curry?
My name is Aiden.
Did you say Aiden?
Aiden, what's your question?
What's the most points you had in a game?
The most points I had in a game, I haven't been asked that in a long time. When I was playing in Germany for the professional team over there, I scored 53 points in a game. But I'm going to add, they didn't have the three-point line quite yet, and I actually could shoot three-pointers, but 53 was the most I had.
Thanks, Aiden. We try to figure out what Pistol Pete would do if the three-pointer had existed.
Yeah, who knows?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as you see, we have a relationship with the Hager Company, and it's time for the Hager Innovator Question of the Day.
Okay.
We've just passed an anniversary for a great thing in sports history, Title IX. I was wondering as to what your thoughts are about the impact of Title IX on the game.
You know, I'm very fortunate. I was born in 1959, so I know I'm dating myself a little bit here. So when Title IX passed, I'm 13 years old. My sister's 3 years older than me. I got so many benefits of sport that she didn't. And like I said, she's only 3 years older than me. I got that opportunity to play as a ninth grader. She didn't have that opportunity. I got the opportunity to play in high school. I got the opportunity to go to UCLA on a full athletic scholarship, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity to study at a great university like that and to play basketball at that level and get the exposure that then led to great things internationally for me. So I'm very much indebted to Title IX. I think life's about getting opportunities and getting exposure to things. And if you don't give people opportunities and expose them to things, they're limited. Yeah. What's out there? There's so many great things in this world, in music and drama and sport and you name it, whatever it is. But if you're basically excluding over half the population, because females are over half the population in this country, it was pretty sad. Yeah. So it's wonderful to see what's happened since, you know, the passage of Title IX 45 years ago, and just the growth for women, not just in sports, but in all educational opportunities and avenues. Absolutely. Tremendous way.
Long way to go still, but we've come a long way.
Yes, we're heading the right way, though. We're heading the right way.
I should point out to you folks, you are in a history museum, and you're here for a little moment of history. As I mentioned, the Hager Company has a relationship with the Basketball Hall of Fame, and last year at an enshrinement we introduced a brand new Hall of Fame jacket with this unique color, Naismith Orange. It's a coat that only is given to folks who are members of the Basketball Hall of Fame. So anytime you see someone wearing that jacket color, you'll know they are a member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. They're the only people in the world who have that jacket. And today, you're lucky enough to be here when we present to Ms. Curry her Hall of Fame jacket. So if that jacket could come out here, Steve, let's present that to Ms. Curry.
Wow, that's awesome. There are Hall of Fame buttons on this jacket. It is awesome. This is awesome. So, wow, thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you.
Isn't that very, it's beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have time for some autographs over here, so please join us. But first, join me in one more round of applause for our very special guest, Hall of Famer Denise Curry. Thanks again.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.